We're always happy to bring in our next guest, Representative Brenda Carter. She represents the District 29. Always great having you with us. How are you?
Hi, Ronnie. It's great to be here again, and thank you once again for inviting me.
Before we jump into the politics of what's going on in Lansing, can we talk a little bit about your education policy town hall that's going to be happening next week?
Yes, this is another in a series of town halls that we've been having. We've invited our superintendents, and this time we're inviting our education associations, our Pontiac Education Association, as well as one of the stakeholder groups, one of the grassroots groups, and finally a representative from the governor's office. So that is exciting. So we're trying to take an overall look, not just from the administrative side of education, but from the teacher's point of view, the community's point of view, and get everyone's feedback, and most importantly, disseminate this information throughout the district and give our constituents an opportunity to ask those hard questions about education.
Well, there are so many hard questions right now because one plan doesn't fit every family.
Absolutely. And we are actually looking into that. I would like to say, this is my personal opinion, Brenda Carter, that we're very fortunate to have an education committee that is comprised of educators, teachers. Okay, yeah, I said it last term and I'm saying it again. We have teachers, we have board members, we have union presidents. It really takes a holistic viewpoint of education. And although we may not be as successful as we want to be in some of the things we are fighting for, I truly believe the overall goal of the committee is to produce the best possible policies we can for educating our children.
How important do you think it's been for you to have the background in education that you had coming in to representing us here?
I think it has been extremely important because I started off student teaching, okay? So I had that teacher background. But when I came on the Board of Education for the city of Pontiac, it was a whole different level of education. It was looking at the human resource part of education and the budgetary parts of education and employment and the whole 9 yards, as well as community engagement. And then taking it a couple steps higher, being the president of the Michigan Association of School Boards, which was invaluable to me because everybody's school district isn't like Pontiac's. And I learned a lot about going up to Marquette, Risa, in the Upper Peninsula. I mean, it was a true learning experience, as well as going over to the west part of the state in Kent County. So I was able to go to Saginaw and go to Adrian and visit these school districts and see how they were educating their children, as well as with the National School Board Association. I was able to go to New York, Ohio, Illinois, Colorado. I was able to go to all of these various state associations when I was the state president and get best practices from them. So taking all of this into the education committee, and there were several board members, school board members who are on the committee, including the current chair of the education committee, which is Pamela Hornsberger from Lands Cruise. You know, we have that background, and then we also have teachers, union members, and we all come to the table and we view everything that's coming across our constituents' concerns, our education community's concerns, our labor unions' concerns as it pertains to education, and we hope to bring forward the best possible policy for everyone.
State Representative Brenda Carter with us here on the MegaCast. She represents District 29. So I'm going to put you on the spot here. How well do you think you would do if you were still teaching right now in this world of remote teaching?
Well, that is on the spot, Roddy, because I do talk to our teachers. And one of the things I learned as a board member, because I taught in the last century, and I mean way back in the last century, and my school board membership came after I left General Motors, but I learned from our teachers how passionate they are about educating our children. The majority of our teachers will do anything, including taking on a second or third job, just to make sure that that little smiling face at them have crayons and books, because that's our future. So as far as what our teachers are doing, they are essential workers. As far as I'm concerned, when we were in the earlier part of the pandemic where we didn't know whether or not our children could transmit the coronavirus or whether we were going to have vaccines in time to go back to face-to-face learning, our teachers still took it upon themselves to say, regardless to the risk, I'm going to educate children. So I feel I'm proud of them. I will fight for them. I think we should do everything we can to make their jobs easier.
Yeah, they really are some of the biggest heroes throughout this pandemic. It's not been an easy road, and we are not out of it just yet. So I'm sure they appreciate all of the support that you're giving them. If we can kind of jump to Lansing now, budget talks. Can the two sides get along and come up with some decisions?
I think we're on the path, okay? But you're reading the news, and there's always good news every single day about the clashing that's going on. But I believe we're making headway. The $1.9 trillion stimulus is going to help state governments with what they're doing. I know it's definitely going to help Michigan, but I believe our number one concern still is, making sure that our communities are safe, that we have a grasp on this coronavirus, because just 2 weeks ago, the numbers were almost nil. And all of a sudden, here they are spiking up again, and then until we get this under control, or at least some type of, gauge around them, we're going to always have the problems that we have. Now, there's two distinct sides to this, I guarantee you this, but I believe everybody in the House wants everybody to be safe, but they also want our businesses to survive. They also want to see our economy return back to somewhere to normal. So the quicker that we get this virus under control, the quicker everything goes back to normal. So, and I believe that is the argument, put lack of a better word, about what's going on, the dissension that's going on between the two sides of the House.
So with that, we read the headlines. And is this something that behind the scenes, the two sides can work across the aisle, but that's not what's being publicly told? That story's not being told because the clashing does get the headlines.
Well, some of the things I've witnessed in the chamber last week, I would probably go to the headlines, okay? And that's not the media, okay? That's me sitting back saying, really? But I'm serious. But I really would like to think that we are going to resolve this, okay? And I know there's enough compassion across the aisles. I talk to my colleagues on the other side of the aisle all the time. And of course, I've sponsored several pieces of bipartisan legislation, which means I'm able to reach across the aisle and work with my Republican colleagues. I'm hoping that we will come to some type of consensus soon, because we really, really, really need to address the needs of our constituents.
And at the end of the day, the two sides all want the same thing. And that's what the community wants, and that's for us to be safe and get our economy rolling. Once again, it's just how do we get there? Can we make a compromise and get there safely? With that, though, if we could talk a little bit about transparency in the government. There is a bickering back and forth about some of these confidential agreements and settlements. They're very common place in the private sector, and there is some argument about should they be allowed in a public sector when taxpayer dollar is paying for it, or if so, should that be shared? Do you believe that the state of Michigan should be more transparent when it comes to opening up some of our FOIA rules and regulations? Because when we look at the nation, we're at the bottom.
And Ronnie, ironically, you bring that up. When I was doing my master's degree at Oakland University, one of the things we talked about was Michigan and the Sunshine Law, and where we are. I think we were a D or an F, and that was way back then. So, yeah.
And this is Sunshine Week, we should point out as well.
Yeah, and I do believe, and I think a series of legislation went through the House of Representatives this week, actually talking about not voter transparency, but transparency in government. And I think all of those bills passed through the House. So I don't have them handy. I didn't come prepared for that, but of course that's easy to Google. If you have those news sources like Gonmore and Mears, it's right there, I'm sure. But yes, I think both sides of the aisle is concerned about making sure that government is transparent.
But as someone, you are an elected leader, so that would make your emails and your documentation open to the FOIA laws. What are your personal feelings on that as someone who would be impacted?
I think it's within, if you take an oath of office to say that you will do a job for the people, and we know full well that our records and everything is public knowledge at this point. No, I mean, it's just part of the job. And, really seriously, I know some people may not feel that way, but I do.
And I will say, as someone who worked for the federal government, we knew our emails were FOIA-able. There were some things that would be redacted due to law enforcement sensitivity, but you knew when you wrote that email that it could be made public at any point in time, and so you operate knowing that as well. Yes. With us right now, we are always happy to have with us Representative Brenda Carter. She's with the Michigan District 29, which of course represents so many of us here in our area, including Keego Harbor, Auburn Hills, but Pontiac too. We are seeing some good things going on there in the city of Pontiac.
I am so absolutely pleased with my home city, which is Pontiac. It wasn't too long ago, I would say back in 2010, that both our city and our school district was in trouble with the state financially. And the school district was in trouble not only financially, but academically. And through the hard work of the elected officials, the school district, which I was a part of till 2018, literally turned their $51 million deficit into a fund balance this year, which I'm incredibly proud to be a part of that transition. But also in the city, if you look around, M1 Concourse, the Strand Theater, Amazon, we're about to get hopefully this Woodward Loop where we're going to create a beautiful downtown that would open it up to our downtown businesses. I think Pontiac is moving in the right direction, and I know the school district is.
Yeah, school districts are vital to a town's recovery, to a city's recovery, and that's why there's been such a big push in the city of Detroit to figure out Detroit public schools. So in Pontiac as well, I've been telling so many of my friends that are in their 20s and early 30s looking to buy the first home, they're priced out of some of the surrounding neighborhoods. I'm like, you really need to look at Pontiac. I think that's going to be the next big place to explode if they can all come together and get that development component right. There's so much potential and possibility there. You're also on the insurance committee.
Yeah.
You just like headaches.
Well, first time when I was placed on the insurance committee, and if we go back in time to, I think I talked about this, I was like, I understood family, children, and seniors because I'm an advocate for families, children, and seniors, and I definitely understood why they put me on education. That was, in my opinion, a no-brainer. But insurance? I learned so much from the insurance industry last term that I asked to be the minority vice chair. Would have been the chair of insurance if we had gotten the majority, but we did not. So I asked to be the minority vice chair, which opened up my world to so many different aspects of insurance. Most people, when they think about insurance, they think about auto insurance, the little gecko or whatever that is, the little guy that goes across, or that emu, whatever that is.
Oh, those commercials drive me crazy. But you remember them.
But there is life insurance, property insurance, health insurance, pet insurance, all these different iterations of the insurance industry. And what I am beginning to be privileged to learn is all of these. I mean, they're coming now. I have the opportunity to learn from a real deep level the insurance industry and how that affects our constituents. A lot of people are concerned about their health insurance. Now,
and I know there's no easy way to answer this, but the biggest question really is, why is health insurance so expensive?
Oh dear, I have an idea, but
I mean, there's no easy answer to it, but it has really skyrocketed through the years and really has become such a huge cost for so many people in their households as well, especially if it's not a part of their employment plan.
And what I'd like to say on that, and keep in mind, Ronnie, that I'm really at the beginning of this very steep learning curve with insurance, and I'm very pleased to have Representative Dare Rendon. She's the chair of the Insurance Committee, who was also a friend of mine before she and I went to the House of Representatives. So there was a relationship there between Dare and I. But I would go out to say that it actually is the cost of our medications. Mm-hmm. You know, that is a big part of it, as well as the cost of our hospitalization. And what we're looking into, Darren and I, we've asked the speaker, could we get a little bit more involved in the insurance part of health policy so we could identify some of these costs and maybe hopefully make recommendations to regulate them. Case in point, we just had a very important piece of legislation go through the Insurance Committee this week, which was the parity for oral chemo. Okay, there is a difference between injections like insulin and then the oral that you could take at your home. And we had several passionate people come on and testify to being able to take this drug at home versus going into a hospital and being there all day and being stuck and prodded. And these are life-saving drugs for these individuals. And we were able to pass a piece of legislation out there pretty much unanimously in support of allowing the industry to provide oral chemo drugs to their patients. There was, of course, the argument of, well, who's gonna take the cost, or whether or not this will impact the constituent or the patient adversely. But we worked out, both sides worked out some agreements pretty much to kind of keep that under wraps and keeping in focus the fact that our constituents really need this service. So this is some of the things we're working on in insurance, which would not have been in my wheelhouse when I was on the Board of Education in Pontiac. I still was looking at the little gecko. But it is now, and we're able to make a difference, and that's the key point. I would like to mention Representative Samantha Steckloff is an oral chemo patient, and she testified very passionately about what it felt like to have to go in there and they couldn't find veins, or they had to keep her there all day, and how her life was disrupted because she couldn't take a pill at home. So what we were able to do with this legislation, I think it's House Bill 4354, was to put some utilization management and drug transparency verbiage into the bill, which will hopefully address that cost disparity that you were talking about.
Well, you know, sometimes we need our legislators to catch up with the science and bring those two sides together. You really do like a challenge, though, let me tell you. With that, just another minute or so here before we say goodbye. This, of course, is Women's History Month. Yeah. Anything you want to say on that topic, or talk about any of the mentors you've met along the way?
Well, I'm going to give a shout out to the Women's Officials Network. This morning I left the network because they passionately felt that I had a little bit too much on my plate, and they felt my value was probably better spent doing what I'm doing in the forefront of fighting for the rights of all, particularly women. Anyway, but yes, also I'd like to give a shout out, Ronnie, with your permission, to the women in District 29 that we are honoring this month. And all of these people have contributed something significant to District 29. First of all, we are going to recognize from the city of Auburn Hills, Veronica Mitchell and Cheryl Brevecki. Veronica Mitchell was the former city council person for Auburn Hills, and Cheryl Brevecki was too. Over in the city of Pontiac, we're recognizing Rosa Randolph, Mary G. Evans, and Maddie Hatchett. All of them are pillars in the community of Pontiac. Now, here's some names you might recognize. Over in the city of Kego, I love Kego. Kego Harbor is Karen Meadrod and Kristen Sonneville Douglas. In the community of Sylvan Lake, we're recognizing Nancy Hunger and Nicole Anderson. And finally, to bring up the rear, we're recognizing in the city of Orchard Lake Village, Liza Lazarus and Duane Sonneville. So these are incredible women across District 29 who have done phenomenal things in our district.
Well, we should also give you a shout out. We know you're a big mentor to women as well. So thank you for all that you're doing for us here in the community. Again, always great to speak with you. Representative Brenda Carter, representing District 29. We always appreciate your time.
Thank you once again for having me anytime.